Good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me. We call it Coffee with PC, and today I've got my favorite treat from the Copacabana coffee truck around the corner. That's my espresso tonica, a little tonic water with espresso on it, a little splash of lemon even. Quite enjoy it, my favorite. I usually don't drink iced. I make the exception for this one. Really like it a lot. And so enjoying that today, getting that pick-me-up for the day. I want to share these few minutes with you. Hopefully it'll be an encouragement to you. Maybe not the pick-me-up that a little caffeine is, but certainly a little pick-me-up for your spirits as we consider more about who Jesus is. And we're moving in the story of Jesus as Matthew relates the account of the life and ministry of Jesus. We're the next week, the next chapter, we're getting into the triumphal entry. We're getting into that last week of Jesus' life leading up to the crucifixion. But there's one more story here at the end of chapter 20 that I wanted to talk about, and it's the healing of two blind men. Now here's the interesting thing. If you were with us last week, you know we talked about the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee, that came to Jesus and said, I want my sons to sit on your right and your left. Now that was a pretty bold request, kind of a big ask, one that had in mind position and power and authority in the kingdom. And we really see a big contrast here, because what we come across in this section is Jesus is making his way to Jerusalem. And as he's going away, leaving Jericho toward Jerusalem with a big crowd around him, two blind men who are there sitting by the side of the road, must hear him coming, know the commotion that he is in the crowd, and they cry out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. And the text says, Matthew tells us that when that happened, the crowd following with Jesus rebukes them and told them to be quiet. Can you imagine this? Now, we don't picture this because when we think about getting around, we're usually in our cars with our family, but maybe going to a big Easter service or a big Christmas service or something like that. But in Jesus' day, for the Jewish people, it was a big deal to go to Jerusalem for, in this case, one of the most important festivals and feast of Israel, the Passover. And so people would make their way from all over Israel. Jesus, if you remember, is from Galilee, which is to the north of Israel. And so he's making his way down from the north of Israel to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover with his disciples. He does this more than once in his ministry. This will be the last time he does that. And because of this hugely popular holiday where a couple of 100,000 people could gather in Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, the roads, the byways to get from the north part of Israel into Jerusalem would be crowded. Crowds of people would come. You'd bring your families, your whole neighborhood would go, and you'd make your way. So Jesus isn't alone on this road. It's not just him and his disciples. There are a lot of people that are with him, and we see in the next chapter what the crowds continue to build to do. But among the crowds, when these blind men cry out to Jesus, Lord, have mercy on us, they tell him to hush. Why? This was a huge, big, celebratory thing that the people of Israel did. In fact, there is a whole section of the Psalms called the Psalms of Ascent. It's toward the end of it. It's in the 120s, 130s. I forget exactly where it is, but there's a section of Psalms that the people of Israel would use as they went to Jerusalem. It was kind of like the songs that they would sing, these psalms from our Old Testament, their Hebrew Bible, that they would sing as they made their way to Jerusalem. It was the excitement of the holiday. It was the crowd together, singing together, celebrating as they're going to go and take the Passover and remember God's special favor and deliverance of Israel. So all of this is excitement. They didn't want the excitement ruined by a couple of blind people. Now, in that day, as you might have remembered when we talked about the rich man, if you're wealthy, it's thought that's the favor of God. If you have an illness, or in this case, a disability like blindness, that was thought to be the disfavor of God. In fact, at one point, the disciples asked Jesus, who was sinned, this man or his parents, that I think he was born blind. So who sinned? Their idea is these two guys along the road must have done something wrong, and they didn't want these less than people, these blind beggars, to interrupt their procession. But that didn't stop them, because it says they cried out all the louder, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us. Can you imagine two blind beggars crying out loud enough to drown out the whole crowd who was celebrating and moving by? Well, they cried out loud enough that Jesus heard them, and he stops and he called them and says, "What do you want from me?" And they said, "Lord, we want our sight." Well, of course they did. Blindness would have rendered them outsiders. It would have rendered them, as you would see here, beggars by the side of the road, dependent on the kindness or the charity of other Jewish people. It was not an enviable position they found themselves in. So if they could just have their sight, that would be a restoration for them. And suddenly people wouldn't look at them as problematic or they'd done something wrong. Now they're in with the society. They could take part in these big celebrations. And Jesus, it says, had compassion on them. And he touched their eyes. Immediately, they received their sight and they followed him. Of course they did. What else would you do? I love this story for a lot of reasons, but it reminds me of a few thoughts. Just to share those with you real quick, kind of the takeaways. It's an odd story. I think, first of all, it's that juxtaposition between the previous story, two brothers, two men who wanted positions of power, and two men who had no power. Two followers of Jesus who had been with him, and their mom particularly wanted them to be the top of the food chain. And these two men who knew they were the bottom of the food chain. The privileged position of the disciples, they sought the highest position. These lowly beggars, these blind beggars, all they wanted was Jesus to have a little bit of mercy on them. You know, what we find is Jesus' response to the brothers was rather harsh. It was, "No, you don't know what you're asking. Can you bear the cup I've come from?" And ultimately saying, remember, if you want to be great, it's not to take the seat of honor, it's to be a servant. But to these who recognized they had nothing and just asked for his mercy, Jesus has compassion and he heals them, changes their life, restores their sight, and they get in line. Can you imagine what an amazing Passover celebration these two guys had, following Jesus and the crowd into town in Jerusalem, being able to celebrate and worship God? Yes, for his deliverance of Israel from Egypt, for them, the deliverance they had from their blindness. But it also occurs to me, maybe this says something to us about prayer, about following Jesus, because sometimes we have a great need, and maybe we want to cry out. We think, I'm just going to pray. I'm just going to ask God, have mercy on me. I need something. Can you please help me? And maybe it feels like people are telling us, why are you doing that? Just hush. That's not good for anything. We need to take a cue from these blind beggars and realize, no, our only hope and their only hope was Christ, was Jesus, was that he would have compassion. And so they cried out even louder. They were not going to be deterred from seeking Jesus. They recognized who he was. Notice they said, "Lord, Son of David." That's pretty significant, because in Israel, the prophecy was there would always be a son of David on the throne of Israel. In this point in time in their history, there was no Davidic king. Rome was in charge, and their statement here was a statement of great faith in who Jesus was. He was the promised Messiah, the Son of David, who would sit on the throne of Israel forever. They knew he was their only hope, and they were willing to risk even the rebuke and the consternation of the crowd because they knew Jesus could handle what they had as a need. And so that needs to be our perspective. You know, when we have a need, our greatest hope is to cry out for the mercy of God. Maybe we don't need a miracle like this where we can't see and we're healed from our sight, but there are lots of things in our life where we can take a cue from them and be undeterred. In fact, Jesus tells a story elsewhere in the Gospels where he basically talks about the persistence of a poor widow to a judge, and the judge finally gives the widow what she wants just so she'll quit bugging him, as if to say that's how we should be persistent in our prayers. These two blind beggars were persistent in their pleas, in their cries, recognizing who Jesus is as Messiah and not going to let anything stop them, because they knew it was their only hope was if he would hear and he would answer. That's all of our only hope, certainly for salvation, certainly for forgiveness. And we hope that you know and you have cried out and you have seen the hope and forgiveness that comes, the life and the goodness that comes from Jesus Christ. We're going to be entering into the Easter season, first Lent and then in Easter. I think Lent starts next week. We're not typically a liturgical church, so I don't have it written down on my calendar, Ash Wednesday and whatnot, but I think it's right around the corner if I've seen some other signs on churches. It may be a week from today. And we're going to be seeing over the next several weeks as we go through Matthew together on Wednesday mornings that the events of Lent that we talk about, that the last week of Jesus, are going to start to come into focus. So I hope you'll walk that journey with us over the next several weeks. But I hope especially that no matter what your situation, no matter what your need, you'll be like these two blind men sitting by the side of the road, doing anything you can when you hear that Jesus is coming, to cry out and seek his mercy. I've found Jesus doesn't always give me exactly what I want, but I know he hears, and I love the phrase here, he had compassion on them. If anything else, if nothing else, Jesus sees our situation and he has great compassion on us. And he demonstrated his compassion, his love for us, by what happens in that Holy Week where he did lay down his life. As I said, we're going to talk about this on Wednesdays. Every Sunday we talk more about Jesus and who he is and what he did. We've been talking about his kingdom and the Lord's Prayer. I think we'll finish up the Lord's Prayer this Sunday. Love to have you join us, 9 o'clock on Sunday right here, mile marker 99 in Key Largo. If you're local with us, come join us. If you're not in Key Largo, hey, find a good church that believes in Jesus, that teaches the Bible and helps you understand who he is and what he means. It's a great thing to have because you can get together with others, and you need that encouragement that comes from a local church. Well, hey, I got to get busy. I got some more stuff to do today. I'm sure that all of you do as well. So appreciate, again, these few minutes that you spend with me. Hope it's been an encouragement, and hope if you have a need that you will be just like the two men in this story that just keep crying out to Jesus, recognizing that he is our only hope, and his compassion is what moves him at times to meet our needs. Well, I'll leave that with you. I'll take my espresso tonica, finish it up, and finish my day. Have a great Wednesday. Have a great week.